Now we've got word that Pascal is helping Jenner, and there may be some other Team Trumpers involved in that. Can you talk about that a little bit? Is that a real thing? Is the Trump team behind Caitlyn Jenner for governor?
Brad Parscale was involved early on, and I think actually putting together Jenner's team. And as far as I know, there are at least 3 Trump alum that are involved in that campaign, a pollster and I think a comms guy. I have written extensively about the problems with the disconnect between what Trump says and what he does, between the mandate and the personnel. And I think that the Jenner thing was totally unsurprising. I pretty much called it. I said that when I read the initial things and I heard the rumors, I knew that like Brad Parscale is going to be involved in this, and this is totally a Trump operation, and it is, even if it's not official, it has his fingerprints all over it. And I think if you also look at the America First Policy Institute, which is run by Brooke Rollins, who is the former president of the Texas Public Policy Foundation, when you look at the Trump administration and you look at things that have Koch Industries fingerprints all over them, like the First Step Act and the rolling back of the zero tolerance policy at the border, when you look at the Office of American Innovation, which courted Silicon Valley, if you recall, like Google and Apple were making trips to the White House, talking with Ivanka Trump. Ivanka Trump unironically embraced the whole like learn to code meme. And so you look at this stuff, why was this happening? You really need to look at people like Brooke Rollins and Trump's closest advisors, guys like Jared Kushner, who ultimately, in reality, were the ones that were really making the personnel choices and running the day-to-day. And none of this has changed. When you look at Trump's post-presidency inner circle, it's all Jared Kushner confidants, Brad Parscale, Jason Miller. I'm blanking on a few other names, but when you look at who's advising him, who's Trump's, like who has his ear, it's all the same people, the worst people in the White House. It's the same people that were telling Trump to stand down during the riots, because if he would do anything about it, it would make him look racist, which might alienate Black voters and Latino voters. It's the same people that are advising him right now. So I think it's pretty clear how I feel about Trump at this point. And I think that there's not enough people that who are willing to call him out and say, like, you're feeding us horrible endorsements and you're attacking all the wrong people. So
interesting. Jordan, what do you think? Would a Caitlyn Jenner governorship on the GOP ticket in California be good for us moving forward, bad for us moving forward, neutral? What do you think?
So I'm not really a moralist when it comes to elections. If the politician can deliver for me, that's fundamentally all that matters. Even someone like Jenner, even if if you hear voices in your head, or you think that, like, there's a Russian agent living in your basement, if you're just like totally delusional, but you can deliver on policy. When it comes to Caitlyn Jenner, I don't see that delivery happening. But I would not be opposed fundamentally because I disagree with that person's lifestyle. So, I think it's two separate questions. I'm not an expert in winning elections. My background's more so in, the national security and international affairs. But I would vote for someone if they were, entirely crazy and had a record of delivering on all the issues I liked. So I don't see a problem with. I think that my instinct tells me it's probably unhelpful for Caitlyn Jenner to be the face of the Republican Party, but I do not have any type of fundamental issue with voting for anyone that has, agrees with what I agree with.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Pedro, good or bad for the GOP moving forward for the goals that we want to achieve? Caitlyn Jenner.
I'll start by saying I don't hate Jenner. I have nothing personal against Jenner, but I think it would be fundamentally bad because you are seeding, I think there's two ways to look at this. If you embrace Jenner for the GOP, then just stop saying that you're fighting the culture war, because you're not. There's nothing cultural about tax cuts and things like that. If you're serious about stuff like the culture war, in other words, things like the biological sexes and transgender ideology, things like that, and you support gender, it's fair to say like you don't actually believe in what you're saying, or you don't understand the contradictions. And so why am I so opposed to gender? Because I think it further normalizes gender dysphoria, which was until recently considered a mental illness, something that we treat compassionately. We don't abuse these people. We are not cruel to them, but we treat it, right? We don't normalize it, and we certainly don't glorify it. The GOP going all in on this is, to me, just another, I think, proof that it has completely lost its legitimacy. And it basically just lives in the shadow of the Democratic Party. And it will just as quickly go from saying Democrats are the real racists to Democrats are the real transphobes, without really thinking about, like, what are the implications here for the future? Right now, you've got gender dysphoria. You can find studies about this. More and more young people are starting to identify or experience what clinicians call rapid onset of gender dysphoria, and it's connected to heavy social media use. So what does that mean? It means that basically the more kids see this stuff get normalized, the more they're likely to think that, like, well, maybe I was born in the wrong body. And that's happening at the same time that we're seeing a push for normalizing gender transition therapy, which is kind of a euphemism for saying mutilating and castrating young people. At the same time, we're pushing for that too, right? Like, you see, like, the profound moral and ethical implications of this, of normalizing this kind of thing. And so one of my friends rebutted me and said, well, Jenner has raised 6 kids. So, you've kind of lost that argument that this is somehow bad for future generations. And my point is, like, well, good for Jenner fathering 6 kids, but more and more young people that believe that the moment that they're experiencing gender dysphoria and then go through with chemical castration or something like that, they're not going to father a kid. It's over for them. So I think there's a lot of issues here. I almost get irrationally angry about this. Not no offense, Jordan. I'm not talking about you, but I'm saying that, like, politicians that really don't see a problem with this, like, yeah, like, Democrats are the real transphobes. Let's run with it. We'll win an election. It's like, no, you won't. You'll lose an election, but not before, like, normalizing this and making this a plank in your platform. Because I think gender doesn't stand a chance. So it's like it adds insult to the injury, right? So there you go. There's my regressive view of things.
Right. Well, I mean, look, on a personal level, I think adults can make any decisions they want to make. And if somebody wants to dress like this or live like that, I'm all for it. Do your thing. That said, I understand how pivotal the transgender issue is in the culture war, but the culture war isn't just culture. It is a struggle between 2 competing regimes, 2 competing ideas of justice and liberty that are incompatible with each other. And the transgender issue is the linchpin. It is the manifestation of the queering of America that they want to see have happen. Queering means to destroy boundaries and to blur categories and to just make us all everything so that no one is anything and there's no identity at that point. And that is why the transgender issue was thrust into the forefront, even though it only affected, up until, I guess, this year or whatever, a very, very, very small negligible percentage of the population. But because the issue is so philosophically important to the battle that they are fighting, which is to take over the United States and destroy it and to turn it into something that is totally unrecognizable from the founding principles, this issue becomes important. So as a personal matter, you can have one opinion. On a political, philosophical matter, you can have another opinion. And then you can have a third opinion on this practicality version, which is, why waste all this time, money, energy, resources, and prestige on somebody who's obviously going to lose? Jordan, what do you think about that, friend?
Yeah, I think Pedro's right that the institutional GOP is seeing that California's moving more and more to the left. So they're going to bring out this candidate that can kind of accommodate that, they've made this calculated weird decision that we're going to run to the left of the base and just, like, abandon everything we once stood for, because this is our assessment of where California is right now. So that's why they decided to choose Caitlyn Jenner and throw all this money behind Caitlyn Jenner. I agree it's going to be a lost cause. It'll probably be like a laughingstock election if Caitlyn Jenner is the GOP nominee. I don't know if Republicans are going to win, statewide elections in California anyway. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger was a joke of a GOP governor, and he had much more credibility coming into the election, and he was just an unmitigated disaster. So if the GOP can't learn from the example of Arnold's, so of course they're going to go with an even more ridiculous clown show in Caitlyn Jenner.
Not going to end up well. Not going to end up well. Maybe our friend Mike Cernovich will get some traction. I saw him polling at 3% without even throwing his hat into the ring. That is incredible name recognition and just urging people. And people just want him to run. Mike, think about it, buddy. I know you're having fun being a stay-at-home dad with your two beautiful daughters. But sometimes duty calls, my friend. Sometimes duty calls.